Okay, so from the last time we were discussing antenna arrays, and antenna arrays, they are entities or constructs where we can combine several antennas. Where so far we have done the dipole antennas, the infinitesimally small antennas, and also the loop antennas. But later, after that, we just presented a new idea that we can have constructs of several antennas in order to have controlled directivities. So if we want to have the signal or the signal directed at some specific direction, we can select by designing them by using different important parameters. This is a good drawing in this slide, where we show several components of the antenna, and all of these, they are expected to have a subsequent phase change between, let's say, source 1, source 2, source 3, source 4, up to n. And with source 4, source 5, we just mean here the different antennas. Sorry, okay. We need a pen. So all of these, they have a phase difference, which would be beta, and subsequently they also have some phase difference, which is which corresponds to the physical the difference in the path, in the geometric path that each antenna is going to each signal from each antenna is going to travel from the source to point P. Okay, so this was the idea that we discussed the last time. One important component that we had to consider, it was the array factor, the AF. And this AF, we derived this one in detail last time. And there were different ways how to write this factor. And in principle, it is very easy, or we can extract essential information if we express the array factor in terms of as if it is a phasor. So a phasor, which would be it would correspond to some amplitude and also some phase difference, which is going to affect afterwards the complete amplitude of the antenna array. And also, depending on the factor or on the values of the AF, we can even have zero radiation at specific directions. And this is what we were going after, starting from last time. For example, just as a short review from what we did last session, if you remember, this was how we could describe the AF. And what was very important for us, there were two major aspects. One would be where AF is going to be equal to 0, which means that we can determine where are the nulls, the zero radiated power at a specific angle theta. So that means that if we are looking for the null, we denote this one here. So if we are looking for the nulls, then we want this term here to be equal to 0. But then if we want to find for the maximum value, if we're looking for maximum value or the maximum radiated power, we want to make 0 this component, okay? Because division by 0 will greatly magnify the directivity or the radiated power in a specific direction. So this is where what we were discussing the last time. And now here we had some, now since we have this factor n, we are assuming that we have several, so the n, it corresponds to the number of antenna components or different antennas. They have similar behavior. And but this n, it can be even a large number, and some approximations which are implemented for the equations of the antennas, they're even considered for n is a large number. We're not talking about going to infinity, but a ratio of n over n minus 1, it is equal to 1. This is one way to represent that n is a very large number. Here we see the complete phase difference. So this is this letter here, psi, and the phase difference, it is a contribution from the inherent phase difference between any two subsequent antenna components, plus the physical distance, which is d cosine theta. But if we multiply by 2 pi over lambda, that would give a factor which is measured in radians, given that K has a unit of meter inverse and D has a unit of meters. Now, this would be the normalized array factor. So the AF factor, it can have a magnitude, but we often want to normalize them to express them as a value from 0 to 1. In case we just want to analyze the direction of where the radiated power is pointing. Now, let's see again. So this is how we're trying to observe the nulls. We covered this the last time. And these were also how we can determine where is the half power of the radiated power intensity. Because if you remember from the second chapter, where we did a lot of important concepts in antennas, this the half power direction, it was defining, or it was a fundamental quantity or parameter which defined the distribution of the signal from a specific antenna. Now, we talked last time that we have broadside antennas, which are antennas which are going to distribute power mostly around, so if this would be the antenna, we would have the power going broadside, which means that we have the maximum can be at an angle of 90. We can have also ordinary end fire. Ordinary end fire antenna would be an antenna which has a signal, it emits a signal at the top and at the bottom. This is the best way to represent it. Otherwise, if we consider that we are using the spherical coordinate system, we are expecting to get most of the emitted radiation at an angle theta equal to 0, and at an angle of theta equal to 180 degrees. The phase scanning antenna, they were antennas where we want to direct the radiated power from an antenna at a specific angle, and this would be any angle from 0 to 180. We may want to have, let's say, the emission to be at an angle of 30 or 60, but this can be done by adjusting the betas and the distances between the two different antennas. The fourth part is the Hansen-Woodyard end fire. This is just an approximation of the equations which are used for the ordinary end fire antenna. So the second one and the fourth one, they are more or less the same, only that Hansen-Woodyard, it includes some mathematical approximations which have been in the literature for some very long time. So this was the broadside array antenna. This is how the distribution looks like. But we had some critical aspects regarding all of these antennas, is that often we observe them to behave in the expected regime or in the expected pattern when the distance between the antennas, it is smaller than the wavelength of the wave that we are communicating with. In case the D is equal to the lambda, which is this case here, or larger than lambda, then a broadside antenna, it becomes from a broadside antenna, which we expect to have the radiation only at an angle of 90 degrees with respect to the z-axis. We then end up into having an antenna which has both an end fire and broadside. This is happening only because the D is equal to lambda, it's not smaller than lambda. These were the tables where we can determine where the nulls of the antenna are. What we need to include here, it is clear. We just need to input the wavelength of the frequency with which we are communicating, or the frequency that we are radiating. Then we have to include the N, the number of antenna components, and also the D, which is the distance between any two subsequent antenna components. Now, this would be the ordinary end fire. Ordinary end fire, in order to determine the relevant parameters. So let me repeat it this way. If we want to construct an antenna which is an ordinary end fire, all we need to do is just we need to insert the angle theta 0 or 180, and we should expect then a direct dependency of the beta, which is a phase difference between two subsequent antenna components. We are going to find this one as a function of the distance. So yeah. So this psi, it is composed of these two components, these two. But in case we want to direct the power at a specific direction, there should be a wonderful or a possible relationship between these two terms. And this is what we find. Now, these are the needed phase differences for an antenna which has N component. and the n components and the distance lambda divided by 4. Once we insert the, let's say, we can find actually the power distribution is going to look something like this. For the end fire, this would be for the top part. For the Z positive values, this is for Z negative values. And the summation of these two together, it would give the end fire antenna. Now, okay. Now this is the radiation for a broadside antenna. We can use these tables that we observe here, table 6.7, to find all some of the important parameters for broadside antennas, which is the first section, for the end fire antenna, and then also for the Hansen-Woodyard end fire antenna. The fourth one, it has to do with the scanning antenna, which, as we said before, is neither broadband nor end fire, but it can be directing the power at some specific direction. Okay. Again, these are the nulls, the maxima, and the half power points, and the minor lobe maxima for uniform amplitudes, and for ordinary end fire antennas. Here we can find the equations for the beam width for uniform amplitude for both ordinary, actually only for ordinary end fire antennas. For example, we can find the first null for the beam width and the half power beam width and the first side lobe beam width. So the first side lobe beam width, this would be the minor lobe, not the fundamental lobe, where we get some non-zero radiated power along a direction which we wish it was not there, okay? Because the end fire is one which provides the radiated emission only in two opposite direction. Scanny linear array antenna. Then the last time we talked a little bit about the feed networks, which was we can pass this one fast because this was just this focuses mostly on the way how we can feed the signal into subsequent antenna components and the constructs that can be used. The most, let's say, or relatively important slide is this one, which is telling us how to construct a phase difference between two different components just based on the physical difference between path length L1, which is at the bottom of this phase shifter, and the path length L2. So if we just do L2 minus L1 and we multiply with K, this would be the phase difference. So this would be the betas that we see in the phase difference between the different antenna components. Scanning array antenna, in order to determine the relevance or the needed relationship between the beta and the, in fact, actually this equation 6.21, you can interpret this one as the direct relationship between beta and D, okay? So now we can change the beta that will directly constrain the possible values that D can get. And we can also, if you remember, last time we solved a couple of examples where we noticed that we don't always have a solution for what we want to do. And this is because, most of the time, it is because the value, the cosine theta 0, it is defined, as you know, for values from -1 to +1. And often, equations like 6.21 and similar ones might operate differently from the expected application whenever D, it is larger than the wavelength, okay? So somehow it has also to do with the principles of interference, constructive interference and destructive interference, which might not operate perfectly whenever the distance between two different antennas is larger than one wavelength. Because what would happen is that at one wavelength, you could immediately have an intrinsic, right away, destructive interference in the nearby regime. So here we have a scanning antenna, and for this scanning antenna, for a specific theta 0, we can determine what are the half power beam width, and for these beam width, we can also construct tables where we can determine, using simple equations, where the nulls are and where the secondary lobes are. Now, this Hansen-Woodyard condition, this was derived for infinitely long antenna with continuous distribution. So this means that, in fact, when we say continuous distribution, this means that we're going to have an n, a very large n, and this means that we can have a finite length discrete array with very closely spaced elements. So we could have a large n where the distance between the antennas is very small. That means that we have a limited length scale of the antenna. Maybe probably this is the best word to use. So we can have a limited length scale of the antenna in case all the components are closely spaced with respect to each other. Now, this Hansen-Woodyard end-fire antennas, if we want to have the maximum radiation power along theta 0, this is where to insert the theta 0 at the expression for the psi. So let me see just for a moment. I wished we had the slide numbers here. Apparently. Anyway. Slide 81. Okay. So, in fact, this derivation of 623a, we can understand this a little better in the future slides, because there is a direct derivation, but we can see this one later. So whenever n is a very large number, the phase difference between two subsequent antenna components is going to be equal to minus kd plus pi over n. And again, we have two possible cases. I want you just to note this carefully. So whenever we have the maximum radiated power toward theta equal to 0 direction, this can happen for two different cases. We can have the psi, it can be 0 degrees, and it can also be 180 degrees, because those are the two directions where the cosine 0 is cosine 0 is equal to 1, and cosine 180 is equal to -1. And this means that we can have two possible conditions for the relationship of the beta on the d. Okay, so this is one way to interpret this one. So I want you just to carefully notice that theta 0, it is the direction of the radiated power with respect to the z-axis, and this can happen for two different psis. Okay, and similarly, if we want the radiation of the antenna toward 180 degree, still this is made possible for two completely different values of psi, which means that we can obtain two different conditions for beta as a function of d. Okay, and this is made possible if we choose the spacing between the subsequent terms in the antenna, which can be given by the expression here, which is equal to d equal to lambda divided by 4. And yeah. For example, if n is equal to 2, this d would be simply going to be lambda divided by 8. If n is equal to 3, this is going to be 2/3 times lambda over 4. So, but when n is a very large number, we expect the distance to be equal to the quarter wavelength. Now, in this is the case when we get an ordinary end-fire antenna for n10 and d lambda over 4, quarter of a wavelength. And but this is for ordinary end-fire antenna. Okay, this is how it is going to look like. Now, if you compare this one with this one, which is the Hansen-Woodyard end-fire array, we notice that the directivity of Hansen-Woodyard end-fire antenna, it is higher, which means that the angle where the radiation is pointing at, it is narrower. So, for example, so we have, for example, the order, I believe, yeah, we can see it in here. Actually, the half power beam width it is 74 degrees for the ordinary one, and it is half for the Hansen Woodyard. Now now the Hansen Woodyard end-fire antennas, they are better because they can have a narrower distribution. But what is bad about these is that the minor lobes are non-zero. So if you go back in here, we notice that the minor lobes for ordinary end-fire antennas, they are smaller, but in order to get a higher directivity along the theta equal to 0, we have to lose some power, which is also sent at along secondary major lobes, which in this case, they look like we have some lobes in the angle of around 60 degrees and possibly 30 degrees and 60 degrees. Okay, so again, these are the values which are provided here for the Hansen Woodyard end-fire antennas, which are greatly modified from the ordinary end-fire arrays. Okay. So here we observe that in this slide we see again the numbers for the ordinary antenna, which has less directivity. This is the bottom part of the slide, and the half power of the ordinary antenna that you see on the slide is 74 degrees. The other one is 37, is almost half. The side lobe, it is -9 decibel for the Hansen Woodyard, and we would like to have the side lobe decibels to be as large as possible, because having as large as possible negative values actually in decibels, that would mean that secondary lobes have a much smaller power, which means that we are losing power in directions that we are not fundamentally constructing the antenna for. Okay, so we like high directivity. We also like very small values for the side lobe, which corresponds to the ratio of the voltage measured in the fundamental lobe and the secondary lobes. Now, this expression, the Hansen Woodyard directivity, this is given by the directivity is given by this equation here, which we, in fact, we know. Wait a second. So the directivity is given by this expression here, only that we can do a couple of change of variables here. The U0, it can be described as, let me see, probably it's better to, we can follow these from these slides. It is going to be better, because this is the result of what these slides are containing. Normally the array factor for the n element array is shown in the first equation, and for small values of the angle psi, which is equal to kd cosine theta plus beta, the initial expression for the AF and the normalized term is shown in the second line of the slide. And in this case, we can do also a change of variables by assigning the beta as equal to minus PD, as it's shown here. So let's think for a moment. The first equation, we are considering the general expression for AF. The second one is considering small psi, and for small psi, sine theta is going to be equal to theta. So that's why Pandete Emrusi Neventa sinus të një dyta KD kosinus theta plus beta, termi sinus bie dhe ngelet vetëm këndi theta, sepse është kënd I vogël. Dhe për sa kohë që ky është kënd I vogël, ne pastaj në ekuacionin e tretë ose në equațiunea 3 și cu M2, we can do a change of variables by substituting the MD divided by 2 with a Q. So then we get Q cosine theta minus pi, and pi then, or the beta, we are writing this one as minus P times D, where P is simply a constant, and D is just a distance. Of course, we know what D is. And overall, we see that with this change of variables, the normalized array factor, it becomes sine z divided by z. We have two substitutions in the overall expression for the AF. Now, we come here to this expression, and the U0, we find this U0 by integrating the U. And in fact, what is U? U, it is the radiation intensity, and radiation intensity, it is composed by several constant terms which correspond to the amplitude. At the same time, the U, it also has the angular distribution, but we know that the angular distribution, it can be described by the AF factor. That is why the AF, we often normalize that one, and when we normalize, we just know that the complete radiated power, it is going to be multiplied by some amplitude, which is a constant number. But again, the angular distribution, we get it from AF. So that means that if AF for an n-element array, when psi is a small value, and doing the change of variables, it becomes sine z divided by z. So then when we integrate the radiation intensity, which is U, we are going to integrate the function sine z divided by z square, integrating over sine theta d theta. Of course, the integral over the d phi, this is going to produce a 2. So this integral over the solid angle, so let's not forget this was the integration over the solid angle. This produces a 2 pi, okay? And this 2 pi, it is multiplied, and we have cancelled 1 pi here, and the 4 we get 1 over 2 times the terms that we observe here, and then we have also this integral over the angle sine theta d theta. And let's try to remember what was z. Z, it had this cosine theta right here. So if we want, so this is sine z divided by z, integrating this by sine theta. Here, let's see for a moment. This is 1 over minimize. Okay, so let's keep this for a moment. This is the U0. But if we notice here, to find the directivity, we are looking for maximum value of U. And let's say this way, to maximize the directivity D0, we need to minimize U0 because we want to divide by a smaller number, and we want to maximize the U max. Now, minimizing the U0, after we apply this integral, what we get is the following. We get all from the integral. This is what we obtain, and this is wait a second. This is V is QK. Q. Let me see for a moment. What was Q? It was ND divided by 2. So this is QD. Sorry, QK minus P. QK minus P. Okay. Let me think for a moment. I cannot distinguish immediately this one, but when we integrate the sine square, we can actually, all the steps that are needed to integrate the sine square, it is the same as integrating sine square theta. This is equal to 1 minus cosine square theta, and this, instead of cosine square theta, this is equal to I believe is 2 cosine theta minus 1. So there are some substitution where the cosine, it can easily be described as a function of cosine 2 theta, And this is where we get these terms, which is equal to pi over 2 plus cosine 2v. So this is what, by the way, I think this is cosine 2 theta minus 1. Cosine, so this is not 2, this is cosine 2 theta minus 1. And this is where this term is, it comes. So this is simply, and yeah. Huh? Okay, let's have a look. So this is, but maybe we need to divide by 2 here. And probably it looks something like this. Second. Who remembers this one? Who told you, Christina? I always check on this one. I know that this is the steps that we need to conduct, but I often forget how this cosine squared theta is written. Someone in the class, Bjorn, do you remember how this can be? Plus me. Okay, yeah, it's plus 1. Then it is minus 1 for the sine, I believe. Yes. So this is all, yes, this is all divided by 2. So that's why we observe these terms, and finally, for the, wait a second. Finally, actually, as while we are trying to reduce the function of u0, we are going to observe that this whole minimization effort for the u0 is going to include the product of this term, which is shown here, times, which is also described here clearly, times this whole factor. So we're trying to minimize this whole function. And if we factor out this 2qk, we get this g as a function of v. And now, if we plot the graph of gv versus v, which in fact we observe that this has a minimum value at around minus 1.46. This is really the minimum value, but we can also observe that neighborhood of the v, it has comparable values. So one could say that really the gv is minimized at minus 1.46, which immediately corresponds to the minimum value of u0, which then would, so this would be the minimum of u0, which would correspond to an increase of the directivity d0. Again, I just want to say that this is a very slowly changing function down here, which means that instead of minus 1.46, one could also use a value of minus 1.5, okay, and we'll still get comparable values, but the precise one, this is what we get. And if we use this value of minus 1.46, then we come to this expression, and after we substitute these numbers, we observe that the beta, it should be equal to kd plus 2.92 divided by n. A few slides before, we saw this term 2.92 again, and I said that this will become clear in the future slides. And this is where we really get this from. So we need to take the integral, which the integral which comes from the AF, which gives the angular distribution, and then when we take this integral, we get the integral of sine z divided by z. Here we are. And then, as a result, we just get a complex function. After we have extracted the constant terms kq, we minimize this. This is what we get, and finally, we see this critical number, which seems that this is really a result of some numerical techniques that we have obtained. Some textbooks or earlier versions of this textbook, you may see this one not as 2.92, but it also appears as 2.94 or sometimes 2.9, depending on the publication of specific papers that researchers do conduct. Okay, because a lot of these equations, they don't have a closed form. What we mean with a closed form is that we cannot describe these integrals using a finite number of terms. This is equivalent to somewhat stating that in order to express sine, cosine, and exponential functions, these types of functions, we cannot express these functions using a finite number of polynomials, okay? Now, what this means that at some point, we will have to use approximations. So we will have to truncate a lot of terms which are very small. For this reason, so since a lot of results depend on the numerical analysis that researchers hardly work on these, you might see different values, but close to 2.92, okay? We're going to use this value. Now, okay, so now that this is, we can even go backwards, actually. The first time we saw this expression, it was, here we saw this. And this is 2.94, but the correct value is 2.92. But here, we just presented it. The proof, step by step, it can be done if we follow these steps here and these integrals. Okay, now a short review with linear arrays, which means that there are antennas which are put in line. We could have broadside, ordinary, phased, Hansen-Udyard approximation of the end fire. Linear array phase excitation. For broadside antennas, beta can be equal to 0, 2 and pi, where n can be 0, 1, etc. End fire antennas, for a distance between the antennas, which should be smaller than the wavelength, beta can be plus minus kd, and this will ensure that we have a wonderfully or very symmetric radiation from this specific antenna. Hansen-Udyard end fire, this is the approximations that need to be conducted when the number of antennas is very large, and in this case, based on the approximations, the dependency of the beta as a function of d, it is expressed by this expression where we see this 2.94 term. So in principle, this is, so always you might, the message that you can take home is the following. For different types of antennas, we're trying to obtain this type of relationship, beta, which is going to be a function of d, okay? How this will depend, or we can also represent this one, but this is somehow like which one is the cause, which one is the effect. Mathematically speaking, this makes more sense because we can adjust the phase difference between the components based on d. But if you want to do something the opposite, we may also need to adjust the d as a function of theta. Let's assume that we have a generator which cannot provide all the possible phase differences between two components. So how are the phase difference generators? You could assume a signal which is sent through a wire. Then you split this wire here. This is length scale L1, this is length scale L2, and this ensures for us to have a change in the phase which is equal to L2 minus L1 times k over times 2 pi over lambda. If the phase shifter cannot produce the betas that we want, what we do is that we can say to the person that constructs the antenna, we say, you know what, we cannot make this much of a phase difference for other considerations, or for other reasons, maybe the noise could be too high, etc. And then they say, okay, we cannot do anything, we just have to adjust this value of d, okay? Or sometimes when you are forced to change the value of d, researchers, they also will be forced to change even the frequency that they have to operate with. That is why research is often very difficult, because just because of the constructs and the impossibility to use some parameters, researchers may want, for example, to use a specific wavelength, but you're not always lucky to end up having the need to pick up a specific signal, and you could be lucky enough that everything matches. Often this happens, but there are also instances that this doesn't happen. An example of this could be the following. Researchers that want to use these huge antenna arrays, which you can see this in Chile, in Latin America, they have huge arrays, and if they want to pick a signal which comes from the atomic oxygen, so O atom, this has a specific frequency, and molecular oxygen, this emits a different frequency, and depending on the constructs down here, which is going to be the d, and this d, it should always be something related to smaller than 1 lambda. then this lambda, this will correspond to the frequency which is emitted by this specific oxygen atom. Let's call this F1, or this specific oxygen molecule, which can be another frequency F2. This corresponds to lambda 1, this corresponds to lambda 2. Then researchers have to figure out now, if you want to pick the signal only of the oxygen atom, they can have a specific construct. But if you want to pick up the signal from the O2 molecule, they need to have a completely different construct. And what they do, whenever they try to get the data, is that they have this huge array, which if you watch it, it's I don't know with what to compare it, but you can compare this one, let's say, with the size of the small Unasa Vogel Bernateranis, Untia Tapsira, Antena Temshkundara. So what they do is that if they want to switch to measure atom versus molecule, they just shut off some antennas down here, because that means that they'll have effectively another distance, and this is what they may need to do. So again, you come back to the slide, all we see in here is just we're trying to construct important relationships between the phase difference between subsequent antennas and the distances. So this is what we're trying to do. Often we might get confused of, okay, we did calculate a lot of betas, a lot of Ds, but what were all of these? The first two lines in this table, they look pretty much almost straightforward. The third one, it's a construct where we need to use some approximations. The last one, it's also something which looks relatively simpler. Now, here we have some notes, which let's have a look what these are. So for the broadside, end fire, and scanning linear designs, there is a maximum spacing. Yes, I think we talked about this one. So D max, that should not be exceeded to maintain. It should not be exceeded, and most of the time, the distance that this D max should not exceed is mostly in the length scale equal to the lambda that we want to pick up. So, okay, so this should not be exceeded to maintain in the amplitude pattern either one or both two maxima. A second maxima with an array factor, if it exists, will begin to appear at theta equal to 0 degree as the separation between the elements increase and the psi approaches 2 pi. This is indicated in figure 6.7. I don't remember what figure 6.7 was, but we can go over the slides. This is 6.15. You can go back to the slides again and see what we are talking. But I think we mentioned this one, at least the issue. Oh, okay, I think it was the case where the broadside antenna, it became an end fire antenna, expecting to have the radiated power across theta equal to 90. We got also these two extra lobes at the top and at the bottom. I think that was the case. Now, the maximum spacing separation did max to avoid the second lobe. It can be used to avoid the second lobe to appear with an amplitude equal to the amplitude of the main lobe, can be obtained by equating psi with theta equal to 0 and or less than 2 pi. Okay, so these are some limitations that psi should have. Okay. So table 6.7, it lists the maximum elements. So this is table 6.7. And the discussion that we are having right now is just to carefully look at the last column on this table, where we see the constraints of the D with respect to the wavelength. For example, for the broadside, we can see that we want it to be smaller than lambda. For the ordinary end fire, we want it to be smaller than lambda divided by 2. And for the Hansen-Udyard end fire, we want it to be precisely quarter of the wavelength. Let me say also another important aspect is that so far we are dealing only with constructs of linear antennas, which means that we're putting a lot of antenna in one line. We have not discussed yet more complex situations where the antennas are placed in two-dimensional array. Okay? For now, they are all put in one line, and this line we often align it along the z-axis, and we try to think in terms of the spherical coordinate system, where the theta is the fundamental angle, which is measured from the z-axis. Okay, so things can get a little more complicated, but as long as they are in one line, these are the fundamental components that we care about. Now, we see also something which we have not covered it yet. We notice that the first 4 lines, they deal with the uniform distribution of the antenna. Then in the last 3 lines, we observe that we can have some distribution of antenna where the excitation factors are not uniform. We see also another type of antenna, which is binomial and Dolch-Chebyshev. And this binomial and Dolch-Chebyshev, they are just approximations that can be used for us when we do the construct of these antennas. We're going to talk about this binomial distribution and the Chebyshev distribution. Chebyshev, it's one type of polynomials which you might have seen, actually should have at least heard about this one in numerical analysis or in another course that we may have taken together. It's one beautiful type of polynomial which is defined in a very narrow range in a similar way like sine and cosine, which are defined from +1 - 1. Chebyshev polynomials, they do the same. And they have also beautiful behavior because they have pretty harmonics. But as I said, we have not done this yet. We'll cover this one in the second session today. But it looks like even for these new construction of antennas, when the distribution is not uniform, we still have some constraints regarding the value of D. We observe that for the binomial distribution of the excitation coefficients, D can be equal to lambda or smaller than lambda. Then for the case of when the coefficients are Chebyshev ones, for specific directions, the D can be either equal to lambda or it's going to be a function lambda divided by pi times inverse of 1 over Z0. This Z0, we're going to see what this looks like. Okay. Now, regarding this element linear array, we did not focus much on the directivity. We covered a couple of examples, or at least we did the directivity when we tried to derive the factor of 2.94 or 2.92 that we saw it two different values, which we tried to explain why they could be different. And that was fundamentally because of the numerical approaches, numerical techniques that they can be used. But we can discuss a little more in details regarding the directivity of the antennas. We always have this type of expression, and which we are used to this one. It's always U max divided by U0. P is the radiated power. And for these three antennas, broadside, ordinary, and Hansen, whenever we get the angular distribution, we know that whenever we want to find the radiated power, we are going to find the integral of the array factor, okay? So for directivity, we integrate the power, but the angular distribution, when we are going to integrate over the solid angle, and the solid angle, we know that it is equal to sine theta d theta times d phi. When we're going to integrate over it, we will simply have to integrate over the AF. So it is essential for all of you, or all of us, to understand how we are going to operate with antennas, is that in the cheat sheet, we need to write the expression for the AF for all types of antenna, whether it can be a broadside. Let's see, broadside, this is how it looks like. And we have to integrate these terms. I think this sine z divided by z squared. We talked about this one, and before a while. Here we have some more details, but I wanted to see. Wait a second. So this was the directivity of the broadside antenna. Now this is the directivity of the ordinary end-fire array antenna. But we can just go a little slower over these. But meanwhile, it would be the time to have a short break. Do you have any question for the moment?
Jo, profesor, pyetja jo thjesht na duhet që t'i shohim me kujdes këto integralet, se në ushtrime na duhet t'i derivojmë, t'i integrojmë vetë.
Është e vërtet, Bjorna. So, what is essential, especially in these types of courses, is that you should be able to derive, actually I mentioned this one before the class, you should be able to derive equation 5 using the information in equation 4. You have to do this one at least once, okay? And then you should understand exactly how do you get equation 6 from equation 5. Okay, so you have to understand step by step everything, and you have to do this at least once. When I was a student, this was the most challenging part. It took some time for me to figure out what I had to do. So I was not focusing too much on the understanding of so the most difficult part for me, which I was really shocked, it was new, the world was completely new. It was something that I was completely doing very wrong, was I did not understand the importance of being able to write the expansion of the 1/r term. Okay, so it took me some time actually, but we've seen this expansion of this term in the near field and in the far field for several different constructs. Okay, but in many classical textbooks, this is always there. You might just think that you can memorize it, but no. It's good to be careful into understanding how this can be approximated. Okay, so this is the first step, which trained me a little bit when I was first exposed to this type of material.